concept of Gogeta's fusion being introduced in the world of Dragon Ball Super has been an ongoing discussion now for several years since the inception of the Dragon Ball Super franchise and the reintroduction of Vegeta in Dragon Ball Super. And having to follow up on my previous Gogeta vs Merge Zamasu video, today we're going to be diving more in depth to see what the fans had to say in regards of Vegeta Blue vs Merge Zamasu and what would be the outcome if the situation were reversed in Vegeta having to be replaced by Gogeta and having to battle against the fused god known as Zamasu. And for a reminder, if you guys are new to this channel, don't forget to go on ahead and punch that subscribe button and enable all notifications. That way you guys can be notified whenever a Dragon Ball video is posted onto this channel in conjunction to news, information, updates, spoilers, and discussions. Hashtag Dragon Ball Squad to be up to date with all the latest in Dragon Ball, as right now we're going to be following up with Gogeta vs Merge Zamasu Part 2, in which I highly encourage you guys to post your thoughts and comments down the comment section below as to what would be the overall end result if Gogeta were to battle against Merge Zamasu in Dragon Ball Super. Now Emosh, welcome back onto the channel, as the subject of Gogeta replacing Vegeta in Dragon Ball Super to battle against Merge Zamasu is going to be the main center of focus here today, and asking you directly, what are your overall thoughts if the situation presented itself in Gogeta having to replace Vegeta in battling against Merge Zamasu in Dragon Ball Super? How significant do you think this would have been onto the show in terms of it establishing a major impact? And as an end result, do you see the battle with Gogeta and Merge Zamasu having to be quite different as an end result than the battle with Vegeta and Merge Zamasu in Dragon Ball Super?
I think the reason they cut off the Potara fusions time limit was because obviously Vegeta was OP. They never really had any intention to make Vegeta the defining moment in that series.
Right.
I think seeing Vegeta was expected, but for example, like if you guys remember, when we first saw the preview for that episode, the Miraculous Wars, whatever, there was no like indication that we were going to see Vegeta that early. Next thing you know, they showcased the previews and we see Vegeta powering up. Everybody was just, so fucking amazed. It was cool to see. However, it felt extremely underwhelming once they brought Vegeta on for like 5 minutes. He was barely able to use pretty much any extent of his power without defusing. I do agree with the Potara fusion like having a time limit. I don't agree with them introducing or reintroducing Vegeta only to have him last for 5 minutes, and then it was just a complete waste of time. And then they give someone significantly weaker than Vegeta the actual spotlight, that being Trunks. At the same time, it's kind of expected. But the main story, the main focus point here is that why introduce a fusion character who is overwhelmingly powerful than his adversary, his opponent, right? And then not have them get the job done. That's always been the problem with fusion characters. However, you can also argue that, in my opinion, the objective or the primary goal for introducing fusion characters was just for marketing purposes. It's just a way to introduce new merchandise. It's just a way to, it's just fluff, like it's just gimmicks, right? Because they're so strong, they should not be the defining moment. They should not be that decisive factor in an arc. So I get it. But I don't think it would have played much of a difference if Gogeta would have came into the picture. And this is just me assuming that if they're going to introduce Gogeta, then obviously they would upscale him so that way he would be on the equivalent level of Vegeta for Dragon Ball Super at least, right? A lot of us know the power scaling for Potara, it's a lot more potent versus like the Meta Maurice fusion. But obviously, disregarding the power scaling concept for a second, obviously they would have upscaled Gogeta so that way he would have been on comparative level, if not stronger than Merge Zamasu. Now the fighting would have been good. I think going into that fusion, the Meta Maurice fusion as Gogeta, Goku, and Vegeta would have known going into that fusion, into that fight, that listen, we don't have much time.
Their time is limited.
Because of that, right? So because of that, they probably would have taken the fight a lot more seriously. You can argue whether or not Gogeta is a prankster, whether or not Gogeta is a lot more serious than Vegeta. Obviously, in my opinion, I think because they fused as Vegeta, they thought they had this in the bag. They thought they had him as all the time in the world to fight.
Yeah, they literally thought they had an hour. But it backfired.
So and so now actually they thought that it would be permanent. It wasn't until afterwards that they found out that it's only going to be an hour. Right. So Gogeta, it's only a half hour. Then you could argue, okay, well now because they changed the way the Potara fusion works, it only works for God tier characters or Kaioshin. Maybe the Meta Maurice fusion would have been a lot more beneficial because it was a mortal technique designed by mortals for mortals. So maybe they would have been able to fight to the full half hour, if not longer than Vegeta, because it was originally meant for mortals. They could have changed. They could have done so much with the concept. I think because we saw Vegito in Dragon Ball Z, it would have been cool to see Gogeta for Dragon Ball Super just for the sake of doing it. And also because we see Kale being Broly, so why not throw in Gogeta into the mix? But ultimately what it comes down to is I think the only thing that would have changed was Gogeta taking the fight a little more seriously than Vegito did, simply because they would have walked into that battle knowing that they only had a half hour. But I think ultimately, even after taking the fight seriously, I still see them giving it to Trunks, giving the spotlight to Trunks, and making some kind of ass pull happen to where the Gogeta fusion doesn't last, and then they don't get, or maybe as they're getting the Soul Punisher ready, they defuse because they have, what I'm saying, like that could have been something that they would have done in my opinion.
That was actually Vegito's weakness, was the fact that he put so much energy into his final Kamehameha, into the idea that it burned right through his fusion. And what I wanted to ask you is, replacing Vegito for Gogeta, do you think that the Gogeta fight with Merge Zamasu would have been that much more violent? In the idea that if we're using the Gogeta from the movie against Janemba, in the idea that he takes everything serious, and knowing that Zamasu is eternal and he's immortal and he cannot die, do you think that he would have had any sort of significant effect on Zamasu's body, not more or less his essence? Because let's say, for example, if Trunks is the one to, get the victory in the end, in some way, shape, or fashion, would you say, in your opinion, that Gogeta is capable for at least being able to destroy Merge Zamasu's body, not his essence? Because let's say, for example, if he was able to destroy his body, you can't really get rid of his essence being all over the universe. So let's say, for example, Gogeta goes in there, does the Big Bang Kamehameha, does, the instant transmission, even to the point where he uses the Soul Punisher. Would you say, in your opinion, the Soul Punisher would do the job in breaking Merge Zamasu apart? Or do you think that Merge Zamasu, similar to how he tanked the final Kamehameha, would he also just tank right through that?
Oh, well, because, the Big Bang Kamehameha wave, he probably would have, I would say, if that, he would probably tank the Big Bang Kamehameha wave. I don't see him taking the Soul Punisher, though.
Really? Why is that?
Well, that's because, like, the Soul Punisher, like, literally goes inside you and decomposes you from the inside out. It's kind of like Hakai. I'm not saying it is Hakai, but I'm saying it's very similar to the way it works, even visually. Like, obviously, when we saw Gogeta throw the Soul Punisher at Janemba, he just completely dematerialized, exactly, and then he became that little boy, right? Whatever was encompassing that little boy, that demon boy in the movie, went back to normal. Like it just completely decomposed. It was gone. Hakai is obviously destroys everything on a molecular level. It just completely eradicates you from existence. But I think Gogeta's Soul Punisher is kind of like that. So I could have seen that working to Merge Zamasu, at least to the degree where it would at least wipe out the Goku Black half of him, eventually causing him to actually become universal. Yeah, but I do see Merge Zamasu tanking the Big Bang Kamehameha wave. No problem. Right. Even though you could argue the Big Bang Kamehameha wave does seem to be a more point blank ranged kind of attack. Obviously, it could be used. It could be used from long distances, but when we have seen it, we've seen him use it in your face. That's it. If you want to reference GT, whatever, that's fine. But I just personally think, regardless, he would have been able to tank it the same way he tanked the final Kamehameha wave, because Merge Zamasu just flew up from that like nothing. It was nothing.
He said revere me, but also Merge Zamasu's not a weak fighter either. He is a formidable, opponent to fight in battle, just because of his immortality, the Goku Black part of him. Would you say, in your opinion, that the Gogeta fight would be that much more impressive than how Vegito displayed his feats? Because with Vegito, we only got so much in the beginning because he punched Zamasu. He was like, come on, Mr. God, what do you got? And then once Zamasu started turning up, Vegito started turning up. And by the end of it, we really got to see, for the first time in a very long time, I think ever, we got to see Vegito really go all in at the end, right before he defused. Like, he literally went all in, and then they cut it. So with Gogeta, would you say that the fight would be serious from the start, or would you see him kind of going along with the flow? Because knowing the fact that they do have half an hour, would you say that it's because of that knowledge that they would go, and try a bit more harder than how Vegito did, knowing the fact that they had an hour to their fusion? Or do you see the outcome being kind of similar in terms of characteristics? Because obviously Vegito and Gogeta are different in terms of personality. So how different do you think this would have favored the battle, incorporating Gogeta's personality instead?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I think going into that fusion, into that fight, they know they have a time limit. As opposed to the Vegito fusion, they didn't know that they had a time limit. Then the Colossus told them that you have an hour. So, at this, you can argue that because once you fuse, it creates an entirely new being. So maybe you don't necessarily maybe Vegeta didn't necessarily care if he had an hour or something like that. Maybe he just thought, whatever, I'm gonna have fun. Characteristically speaking, they're both not that very, different from each other. It's still made up of Goku, it's still made up of Vegeta. You're gonna have the good personalities, you're gonna have their bad personalities. But ultimately what it comes down to is fusion characters have never really been the deciding factor into getting the job done. But because it really depends on you, honestly, like you as a fan base or you as a viewer,
right?
Who you like more. Obviously, you're gonna push for whatever fusion you like more. I think it was great to see Vegeta return to the series. I just think they just did him an injustice by just jerking us off by giving us the Potara fusion, by giving us Vegito, seeing Super Saiyan Blue Vegito, knowing how strong he is, both anime and manga, and then it just doesn't do what it theoretically should have been able to, right? But like I said, going into that fight, they know that they have a set time limit. They know they have a lot less time than they did when they were Vegito, because they did fuse back in Dragon Ball Z. They had a lot less time compared to that. I think ultimately they would have been able to perform a little better from the get-go. I don't really see them worrying too much about warming up, yada, 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 because there's really no point to do that. It just, what it comes down to is fusion characters generally have never really been the deciding factor. And I think that in itself is probably why, in my opinion, I would not like to see fusion characters return to the series, especially if that's how they're going to portray them. If they're going to portray fusion characters in a way where it's just, here you go, guys, fan service, enjoy them while it lasts, and then that's it, well, then just don't give it to us. Just don't tease it, just leave it alone, and we'll be happy with playing Gogeta in the video games or whatever. But then again, we haven't really seen Gogeta in the series either, so some people still talk about, well, will we eventually see him? But I think what they did with Vegito against Zamasu is kind of like them telling you guys that, okay, don't count on fusion anymore. That's it. We're going to give it to you this one time. It is what it is. Enjoy it while it lasts, and then we go forward from there. But I think Gogeta would have taken the fight a lot more seriously early on, strictly because he knew going into that fight he had a set limit.
Now, I do have a few questions here from the community in regards to this, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this as I go ahead and read this. Now, this comes from iScoops12, and he says, and I quote, "As much as I truly enjoyed this what-if conversation between you both on Gogeta versus Zamasu, the end result would have been Zamasu emerging as the winner, and here's why. If you pay close attention, during the battle between Vegito and Fuse Zamasu, despite having to arguably be weaker, it was still able to hang in there with the likes of Vegito and smiled through every punishing blow. Gogeta wouldn't have any major effect on Zamasu because of his ability to tank high caliber based moves like the final Kamehameha, which in turn means that he'd also tank the Big Bang Kamehameha as well, unless you disagree in believing the Big Bang Kamehameha would hurt him. The Soul Punisher would not have a major effect on Zamasu because of his essence being eternal. Need I remind you that by the end, both the manga and the anime, they needed Zeno-sama to truly win. Zeno is unlike any other being we've seen, yet despite tanking everyone else's attacks, Zeno one-shotted him into oblivion, whereas Trunks and Vegito did not, so in turn, Gogeta wouldn't either. Don't get me wrong, Gogeta would give Zamasu a great battle on a technical side when it comes down to hand-to-hand combat, but fully erasing him? No. Zamasu wins. So what's your take on that statement there?
Well, I think that's why they didn't give us Gogeta then, because people would have expected to see Soul Punisher. That's what it comes down to. And ultimately, they kind of hinted at Beerus going to that timeline to take care of him, right? But they never really utilized Beerus. So now they understood, well, if we use Gogeta, he has that move. Like, so let's not use that, right? So there's really no way to argue against Soul Punisher, right? There's no definite. If you're stronger than your opponent, right, and you use Soul Punisher, then GG. It is what it is. However, I think whoever that wrote that comment is commenting. He's absolutely right. That's one. But I think he's commenting based on him knowing what happened after the Vegito fight. Anyway, for example, we all know that Zeno was required. We know that Trunks had to cut him in half. Like these are comments being made after all that stuff happened. So we're trying to discuss it on a platform where, what if it was just Gogeta versus Zamasu and not Vegito, and just pretend you didn't know what happened afterwards? Right. Like, that's what we're talking about.
But in turn, he's also saying that Zamasu would be able to survive the Stardust Breaker. How do you feel about that?
I personally don't agree with that. That's just, but it just comes down to preference. How you view Stardust Breaker or Soul Punisher versus how I view it. I view it as like a mini Hakai to a degree. I feel like if Gogeta would have been introduced in the series, they had to make two choices. Either A, he uses Soul Punisher, and just before he uses it, he defuses. That's ultimately how I would see, or how personally I would write the series, because I created with Gogeta. If I was one of the writers, right? If I was Akira or Toei or whoever, and I knew I made this fusion, I know what Soul Punisher is capable of, I know that's why I only put him in a movie. I never made him part of the series for a reason, because he has this specific technique. And now that we have Hakaishin who have the Hakai, it's kind of like it may have created a love-hate relationship between the likes of Gogeta and Beerus. A lot of people already, for example, as a result of seeing Vegeta both in the anime and the manga, right? People automatically start comparing Vegeta to Beerus. But because Beerus was not allowed to come to that timeline, and just like in the manga, Shin says, perhaps Vegeta has surpassed Beerus, right? But then we see that same Beerus body a Master Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta with casually, it really puts that stuff away. But now having Gogeta come into the picture, upscale him to match the Dragon Ball Super criteria in terms of power scaling, have him use Soul Punisher, and it completely erases Murd Zamasu, and then he becomes universal after that. People would have started comparing, wait a minute, Gogeta knows Hakai, the same way Goku used Hakai in the manga. So basically Gogeta's Soul Punisher is like a mini Hakai, then people would have compared Gogeta to Beerus or to Hakaishin. It would have created this big, it would have conflicted with the Hakaishin as a character in my opinion. So that's why I think they didn't include Gogeta. They could have. There's really no reason why they didn't have to. They could have done it. Then people can say, well, they don't really know the Metamorphosis fusion dance, They could have learned it. Vegeta could have learned it.
Absolutely,
it's really not that difficult, right? So it really comes down to how you view Vegito, how you view Gogeta. I agree with him though by saying the end result is the same. They would have needed Zeno ultimately, but I also feel like at the same time that's why they never really included Gogeta and why they included Vegito instead of Gogeta, because the Potara was just an easier means to just, okay, put this on, let's fuse, it doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. You know, it is what it is and going forward. But I think he's looking at it from a point of view where he already knows what happened afterwards, and that's why Zeno-sama was needed. I think the manga iteration does a better job at showcasing why Zeno was needed against Murd Zamasu, because in the anime, he felt completely underwhelming. We saw Goku push them back a couple times. Trunks and Vegeta, father-son Galaga, pushed them back a couple of times. Even though that wasn't in Rage Zamasu, it still comes, it still puts a big question mark on your head though. But good comment nonetheless. I agree with him to an extent. I don't think he would tank the Soul Punisher though. I don't agree with that at all.
Now we have another comment here from Mr. Key Monster 12, and he goes on to say, I think it plays out the same way, to be honest. Then again, there are a lot of factors. Since it's the fusion dance, it may be a bit shorter than the Potara, so since Vegito was about 6 to 7 minutes, then the fusion dance would be 3 to 5 minutes. That's if you take the different fusion times into consideration. If it's the Gogeta from GT, then they're just like Vegito. If it's Fusion Reborn, then it's probably over quickly. Think it would be the same, just about it, but since the plot wanted Trunks to win, Gogeta would defuse before finishing Zamasu off. If he used Soul Punisher, then I think Gogeta has a good chance of weakening him drastically. I also think the Soul Punisher at full damage would do some similar damage to the sword / Trunks use. So ultimately implying that the Soul Punisher would have the same effect as Trunks' Spirit Sword. So what are your thoughts on this guy quoting and saying that perhaps maybe the fusion dance would have a much shorter time limit, ranging between 3 to 5 minutes, as opposed to the Potara having 6 to 7? And just what are your thoughts on the concept of the Soul Punisher being able to rip Zamasu apart, but not entirely killing him? Because I think that the Soul Punisher, that's going to be a huge key factor here, because that's what I feel like his final finishing move is, aside from probably, if you want to count this, the Big Bang Kamehameha times 100 if they want to go down that route, which I doubt, because that's more or less a GT thing. But right, aside from the Big Bang Kamehameha, definitely the Soul Punisher technique. So what are your thoughts on the time limit being shorter, and what are your thoughts on the Soul Punisher being able to rip him apart?
I think they would have done the same thing with the time limit. The Potara was downscaled because they introduced this god tier character, Kaioshin and Hakaishin, for a reason, right? They wanted to create a means to, they understood how strong Vegeta was. They also understood how much stronger Vegeta was compared to Murd Zamasu, right? At full power at least. So let's create a means to give the fans what they want by seeing Vegito, but how do we nerf him? Because the last time we nerfed him, or the last time they split apart, was because they went inside Buhan's body, and they ended up. There was really no explanation as to why they split apart, right? That maybe because Buhan's body just decomposed the fusion to some degree, Like a lot of people, they still theorize about that stuff. So there was really no explanation, and because of that, they had to create a new one. Oh, I know. Let's make the fusion only last for an hour. Oh, wait a minute. I thought you said it was gonna last an hour. Oh, well, I guess you guys burned through the fusion. What do you mean? Like, this isn't Meta Marie's. Like, it's a set hour.
There is no difference between them anymore if you think about it, right?
So, but basically, what that tells you is that it's because Potara was not meant for anything outside of Kaioshin that you are capable of burning through that. And another thing that we've learned from this, the fact that they burnt through the Potara fusion tells you that even the Kaioshin themselves are not capable of reaching a power of this magnitude, right? Because if that were the case, well, you can argue if the power itself is what's defusing them early, then you can argue whether or not, even if they were Kaioshin, who's to say they would still stay fused? Because if they were so strong, maybe the Potara would not be capable of, keeping their strength fused into one being. See, there's a lot of factors in there. Like I said, I do agree with him. However, when you compare Vegeta to Gogeta in terms of like techniques, we know Vegeta has the Vegito sword. We know he has Final Kamehameha Wave, but he doesn't have Soul Punisher. He doesn't have anything like that. Gogeta has Big Bang Kamehameha. He has Soul Punisher. Those are two primary moves that we know of for these two fused characters. Now, I'm gonna give you another reference. I see the Soul Punisher to be like a mini Hakai, if not a mini Spirit Bomb. Like it's like a Spirit Bomb in his hand, in the palm of his hand. He just throws it at you, and that's it, goodbye. And it's primarily used against evil, stuff like that. Which we recently thought the Spirit Bomb was also used primarily for evil characters, and then look what Jiren did to it.
It was completely pushed it back.
Like I said, they've clearly made changes so that way it adapts to the series. So we have to assume the same thing for the fusion time. I don't think that it would have been less than Vegito's time. What I think is that because they would have designed it in a way where, because the fusion dance was designed by mortals, it would have been more beneficial for them. If anything, we could have seen the same screen time with Gogeta. If anything, we could have seen a little more. But what it comes down to is the fact that at the end of the day, Plot wanted Trunks to be that guy. Plot wanted Trunks to be the guy to end it all. And ultimately, he didn't really end it all. He just kind of made it worse. Right? So he cut Zamasu in half. Zamasu becomes universal. Then he pretty much wipes out everything after that, which really hurts Merge Zamasu as a character, because now you have Merge Zamasu getting split in half, and it took for him to get split in half, or essentially be on the verge of dying, right? To not having a physical body for him to get anything done, which defeats the purpose of fusing, which defeats the purpose of having Goku Black, which defeats the purpose of going back in time, getting Goku's body, coming back forward in time, getting stronger, getting Super Saiyan Rose. It really hurts all of that. So that's why I just don't like the way they did the anime. But also what it comes down to is, I agree with him, but I also agree simply because I feel like they would have made certain changes to where it adapts to what the series is trying to portray.
I think that by the end of it, Gogeta's outcome, I think that he would not be able to fully destroy him. In terms of maybe his body, I could see that maybe with the Soul Punisher, but in terms of his essence, man, you're not getting rid of that. So if anyone out there poses the question, can a fusion character take on a universal Zamasu, my answer to that is no, because they needed Zeno. Zeno erases universes just because of a mood change, let alone anything else. So I think that, in my opinion, the Gogeta fight would have been that much more brutal in terms of like hand-to-hand combat, in terms of the Soul Punisher being used. But I would like to know what you guys have to say down in the comment section below, if you guys agree or disagree with myself and Emosh, and if you guys believe a different outcome would, come about. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys truly did enjoy. If you guys did, slap a like on the video down below. Also, guys, make sure to go ahead and check out Emosh's channel. I will leave a link to that down in the description box. He also does various different, Dragon Ball content, so make sure to go ahead and subscribe to his channel as well, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. We hope you guys enjoyed. Tune back in for more, and we'll be seeing you all down below. Take it easy, guys. Peace.